What's up, everybody? We're back, Corey Hughes Bloody History. Today we're gonna detour to Mexico City. We're gonna spend a couple days going over some interviews of a woman named Ann Goodpasture, who was basically a CIA agent, worked under Win Scott in Mexico City during a time Oswald was allegedly down there, and at the time of the assassination. She's just as much a fucking sniveling, lying cunt as all the other male CIA agents. So you just don't really hear about female CIA agents. So, memorandum for the record. This is from the HSCA. They did an interview with her in the 1970s. Then there's a couple interviews with her in the 1990s under the ARRB. So... memorandum for the record, subject meeting with Ann Goodpasture. Russ Holmes and I met with Ann Goodpasture for almost an hour and a half Wednesday morning, November 22nd, 1978, at my office. We had asked what matters of interest had been indicated by HSCA personnel in the course of her deposition on Monday. She was asked if she had talked with agency personnel prior to her deposition. She replied that she had been called by George Ioannidis, who told to be told that the HSCA's Goldsmith was trying to get in touch with her. She also told them that she talked to Holmes and me following her last deposition. The photography in Mexico City seemed to receive the main attention. She told them there was no photography of Oswald. They went past that to why it no longer exists, which she couldn't explain. She said it had been maintained intact so long as she had responsibility for it. Subsequent to Win Scott's retirement, she understands, the new chief didn't want so many records. She says the file room was unbelievably crowded, full of unnecessary records. She understands that Millie Rodriguez, who had custody, and Charlotte Bustos, who had to approve what happened, under Charlie Rivera's authorization, represent the ones who cleared out files and would have been the ones most likely to have destroyed them. Bustos, however, says they weren't destroyed, which Goodpasture doubts is correct. And Goodpasture says she knows there is no film or pictures from L.I. Lyric when she did her work in 1977. That's L-I-L-Y-R-I-C. It's probably L-I/L-Y-R-I-C when she did her work in 1977. While we did not discuss the point, the so-called unidentified man was photographed by L.I. Lyric, and that is the file that no longer exists. Her memos of protest may have gone with that. They asked her why she was hired, and she had some confused impressions about testifying eventually. This is incorrect, as she was hired because someone was needed who was knowledgeable about the files, and her name emerged. I told her this. Okay, so the photograph they're talking about is the photograph of Saul Sage, the guy who they initially said was Oswald, but it's obviously some fucking Russian-looking guy, right? Some Eastern Bloc-looking motherfucker with a rigid jawline. That guy is known as Saul Sage. Now, that's obviously a fake name. No one really knows the real deal behind that. Or if somebody does, it's buried out there in some papers. But the name Saul Sage pops up a couple other times. It came up one time when I was referencing Jean-Pierre Lafitte. So who the fuck knows? These guys, this is a twisted web, remember? All these guys are interconnected. On the unidentified man, she states that she protested sending in the photograph and that it was done over her objections. There were memos from her on this. She suspects the memos were removed for some ulterior purpose, the reasoning for which is not at all clear, as it is hard to guess what was wrong with her taking a position, much less this one, or that it was very important whether it was documented or not. In any event, she testified in such a way that it could lead the HSCA investigators, given their bent, to advance it as proof that files were destroyed to cover something up. On Win Scott's draft manuscript, she testified that it was wrong. She thought it occurred following his retirement. She told Goldsmith, the HSCA man taking her testimony, that he, Goldsmith, knew the draft was in error, as the transcripts showed that Oswald not only did not spell his name, but also did not give it in full. When she emphasized this point, Goldsmith quickly, so it seemed to her, changed the subject. She emphasized that whatever Scott saw on this, she saw first, so she is certain. As Miss Goodpasture tells it to us, it would seem that Goldsmith did not press on much new about photography, except that's the Scott writing. She volunteered incorrect information about why she was hired to do the research in 1977 and raised a specter about destruction of records. Otherwise, the interview would seem uneventful. And that's from SD Breckenridge. That's just a brief summary of the interview we're about to go over. All right, October 12th, 1964, CIA memo for the record. All right, this is a document from the HSCA days in the 70s. So I think when they have these dates here, like October 12th, I think this is like they're referring back to a previous document or something like that. On October 12th, 1964, the chief of covert action, Jim Flannery, wrote a memo for the record reporting that Elena Guerrero de Paz, P-A-Z, had told her story to Eunice Odio. I don't believe there's a connection to the Odios in Dallas. The committee has not been able to determine if Elena Guerrero told Miss Odio the story personally, or if Miss Cobb related to Miss Odio what Elena had told her. I believe that's June Cobb, if I'm not mistaken, who related to Tichborne. Tichborne was Henry P. Lopez cryptonym. Mr. Lopez was a witting asset who wrote propaganda pieces for the CIA. After careful review of his CIA file, the HSCA has not been able to establish a link from Mr. Lopez to either Ms. Odio or Ms. Guerrero. The story is not as detailed as the 10-5-64 version. There is no mention of Deba Guerrero Galvin. The story, perhaps because it is third hand, differs from the previous story in two areas. The party was at the Cuban embassy, not at Ruben Duran's. Elena talked to a Cuban. The day after the party, Elena and Deba saw the three Americans on the Insurgent Main Avenue in Mexico City. The Guerreros claimed that they had recognized Oswald's photograph when it was published after the assassination. Sylvia Duran's arrest underlined the Guerreros' certainty, the man that had been Lee Harvey Oswald. Deba added that Lynn and one of the Duran brothers had made trips to Texas. She added that even though the Duran brothers had always been poor before the assassination, they were both driving expensive new cars. The source of the memo was a witting Central Intelligence Agency asset by the cryptonym of L.I. Cookie, whom the committee identified as June Cobb Sharp, while receiving L.I. Cookie's file. According to Elena, Ms. Cobb was sent to her house shortly after the assassination for a few days by a mutual friend, a Costa Rican writer, Eunice Odio. CIA's number 580583, WX-7241, entry number 427, page 92, CIA number 719. Ms. Guerrero asserted that while at her house, Ms. Cobb expressed interest in the Kennedy assassination. One night, Elena's sister Deba, who was visiting, got drunk and told the whole story. Claiming to be a CIA agent, Cobb suggested that Elena and Deba go to Texas to tell their story. Elena stated that when Cobb's suggestion was rejected, Cobb stated that she would arrange a meeting with the CIA station chief. Winston Scott was the Mexico City station chief in 1964. The meeting did not occur because Ms. Cobb was asked to leave the Guerrero house, evidently because she kicked Elena's cat. CIA number 580 to 583, a bunch of references, blah, blah, blah. A notation on the memo says that L1, L.I. Cookie 1, never regained contact with Elena Guerrero de Paz. This memo right here is written by Ann Goodpasture, and it's covering this set of incidents involving Elena Guerrero de Paz and Roberto Duran, or whatever the fuck his name is. This is an area of the assassination that I read about in somewhat close to the beginning. Never spent a whole lot of time on because I knew Mexico City was bullshit from the jump. So when it came to Sylvia Duran and her getting arrested and all that stuff. I haven't really dug too much into that. I believe the suspicion was that she had somehow conspired with Oswald when he was down in Mexico City. But remember, he was never in Mexico City. It was Kerry Thornley who went to Mexico City. And how many times did Kerry Thornley go to Mexico City? At least 3 times, right? When he left New Orleans to go to Whittier, California in May of 1963. Then when he returned in early September, he passed through there, end of August, early September. And then he arrived back in New Orleans on September 4th. And then he then heads back down to Mexico City, where he is impersonating Oswald down there, prior to his heading to Alice, Texas, with Marina and all that stuff, right? So this maybe this will give us some this digging into Ann Goodpasture will give us some more insight into what the CIA was thinking, even though she's a lying cunt. I don't give a fuck. If you work for the CIA, you're a cunt. You're a lying cunt, period. It's your job to be a lying cunt. So just like every other CIA agent, we can only believe little bits and pieces and only things that make sense in the story, right? The L.I. Cookie memo was not inserted in either the Elena Guerro or Lee Harvey Oswald P personality files, but in a local leftist and Cuban project file. The committee learned about the memo from WX-7241, a chronological history of the Oswald case prepared by Ann Goodpasture for the CIA in 1976. The memo was found in December 1965. See WX-7241, page 94. CIA number 721. Stanley Watson found the memo. A marginal notation on WX-7241 says, quote, "Why was this not sent to headquarters?" Page 87, CIA number 714. The committee has been able to determine that the memo was forwarded to headquarters shortly thereafter. Embassy official, not one of her cousins, about the 3 Americans. Attached to the memo was a note from Flannery to the chief of station, Win Scott, which read, "Do you want me to send the gist of this to headquarters?" Scott then noted that the memo should be filed. The file indications show that the memo went into the Oswald P file and the Elena Guerro P file. November 24th, 1964, CIA informant report. On November 24th, 64, a CIA informant, the House Select Committee has been unable to determine the informant's identity, reported information, memo from Win Scott to the files, read June Cobb, 11/25/64, CIA number 592-593, WX 7241, page 88, entry number 404, CIA number 715. He had learned from L.I. Chant, /1. While reviewing L.I. Chant 1's file, the committee determined that the redacted period. Elena claims that the day following Kennedy's assassination, Calvillo escorted her and her daughter to the Vermont Hotel for protection. See also December 25th, 1965, Thomas memo for more information on Manuel Calvillo. Let's pull everything on Manuel Calvillo, Calvillo. The informant asserted that June Cobb was an American communist who rented a room from Elena Guerro. Memo from Win Scott to the files, read June Cobb, 11/25/64, CIA numbers 592 to 593. Same data as before. Fuck all those little notes. The informant also stated that Elena tried to talk to Robert Kennedy when he was in Mexico because she had met Oswald and 2 friends, Cubans, at a party at Horatio Duran's house. Oh, shit. All right. There we go. The informant also stated that Elena tried to talk to Robert Kennedy when he was in Mexico because, quote, she had met Oswald and 2 friends, Cubans, at a party at Horatio Duran's house. All right, so Horatio, okay. All right, so whenever we have Oswald and a bunch of fucking Cubans, who are we talking about? We're talking about William Seymour. In this case, again, it's going to be the same people who went to Sylvia Odio's house, right? Lawrence Howard, William Seymour, Lauren Hall. So now we can connect those 3 to Horatio Duran in Mexico City. I need to make a sharp mental note of that. In addition, the informant claimed that Elena also told her story to an American official at the embassy who claimed to represent the Warren Commission. The chief of station noted that He had asked the informant to pursue the story, but there is no indication that L.I. Chant, 1, ever complied with this request. HSCA review of classified CIA documents. November 24th, 64, Elena meeting with Mexico City legal attaché officers. Elena and her daughter also told their story to the Mexico City legal attaché. The legal attaché in 1964 was Clark Anderson. They recounted the same story previously given to L.I. Cookie 1. The date of the party was given was as September 30th, October 1st, or October 2nd, 1963. Okay, so that would seem to preclude William Seymour and Lawrence Howard and Lauren Hall, would it not? It would. These dates, because where the fuck are they during these dates? They're in Dallas. So the Sylvia Odio incident happens on September 27th, I believe. William Seymour is then seen September 28th at the shooting range. And these dates, September 30th, October 1st, October 2nd, these would correspond with dates that Kerry Thornley was in Mexico City, right? Because he is back in Alice, Texas by what? Is it October 3rd? October 3rd, he's seen in Alice, Texas. Yeah, so this makes pretty much a lot. This makes sense, but who were the two alleged Cubans who were seen with him? If it was not Lawrence Howard and Lauren Hall, who are not Cubans to fucking begin with, just as a reminder. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there were a bunch of these fucking anti-Castro Cuban guys down in Mexico City at the time. So the entire Mexico City stuff I found was more distraction than anything else. Is talk about people training at a farm down there. I think it's all bullshit. There's a lot of distraction with Mexico City that I remember coming across and being like, oh my god, this is so stupid. I'll have to dig into that. But a lot of the stories of Mexico City have nothing to do with the assassination at all. Do I think that there was definitely some coordinating going on there at some point, probably prior to or between May of 63 and September of 63? Do I think there was something going on in Mexico City there? Absolutely. Maybe the planning and setup for Kerry Thornley's trip there to impersonate Oswald. Maybe they were setting up some of the details on how that would go. Maybe Thornley met with Sylvia Duran and Elena de Paz and all these people in Mexico City as he went there in May and then again in September, early September, not late September, right? So he went there twice, and why did he go there? He obviously had connections there. He obviously met with people there. So that's why this kind of sparks my interest. But I feel like everything going on here in Mexico City, really, besides just being another one of those intelligence-rich cities, besides that, I think the only thing going on here is that you have the setup of Oswald again, and the preparations being made for it with Kerry Thornley in advance. That's all I can really... That's the only thing that really strikes me as happening in Mexico City. Like, that's it. I mean, people have written whole fucking books about Mexico City. It's kind of a waste of time. It's great that they dug up all those dots. But until you put Kerry Thornley in Mexico City, those dots are worthless. All right, so let me continue. The date of the party given was September 30th, October 1, or October 2nd. The agent who wrote the report, and that's redacted, noted that Lee Harvey Oswald could not have been identical with the American allegedly observed by Mrs. Paz at the party if this party were held on the evening of October 1st or 2nd, 1963. FBI investigation of President Kennedy's assassination has established that Lee Harvey Oswald had departed Mexico City by bus at 8:30 a.m. on October 2nd, 1963, when Mrs. Paz stated that she saw Lee Harvey Oswald walking on insurgents. Yeah, so there's some more disinformation here. He never... Okay, so you have the bus pass and the visa, right? And If I'm not mistaken, the bus pass had a date stamp on it when it was purchased, and it was purchased on September 30th. But there's no other indication on the ticket that it was for a later date, right? So I don't know how they square that circle. If I'm going to buy a ticket on September 30th and not get on the fucking thing till October 2nd, that doesn't make much sense. Especially if the ticket doesn't indicate that you're leaving on October 2nd, right? Nobody ever left on a bus. The bus ticket, if I'm not mistaken, much like the money order used for the rifle and all the stuff surrounding the handgun and all that fake evidence, all comes back to that lawyer. All comes back to the same lawyer who dug up all this evidence that was all photocopies of the originals, and the originals no longer exist. I need that lawyer's name. I can't remember what the fuck it was, but this one lawyer was behind a lot of the faking of the evidence, or connected to its discovery in some way. So we need to figure out who that fucking lawyer was. All right, let me continue. Elena was questioned regarding the identity of the persons attending the party at the Ruben Duran home who might have been in a position to observe the three Americans. Elena stated that in the course of the party, her daughter met a young man named Alejandro, and he was apparently quite smitten with the daughter and tried to call her on something party and danced with him. The daughter did not take the calls, and as a result, Alejandro wrote several letters to the daughter. Ms. Garrow exhibited two of the letters, as well as a business card, which identified the young man as Ario Alejandro Lavigny Stenius, Lavagni, and then Stenius, Stnius. The letter which Mrs. Garrow said was the first written by the young man to her daughter bore the details September 1st, 1963, and the Mexico City Post Office postmark September 2nd, 1963. Hold on a second. Those are dates that Carrie Thornley was back in Mexico City at the time, right? The letter which Ms. Garrow said was the first written by the young man to her daughter bore the date September 1st, 1963, and the Mexico City Post Office postmark September 2nd, 1963. When Ms. Garrow was told this, she commented that communists probably had facilities for falsifying postcards. To investigate Ms. Garrow's story further, the Federal Bureau interviewed Ario Alejandro Lavigny Stenius on November 27, 1964. Lavigny recalled that there were approximately 30 people at the Ruben Duran party, few of whom he knew. He recalled having met a Mexican girl who had recently returned from living in France. He was unable to fix the date of the party, but felt it was probably early in September because of heavy rain, which occurred as they were leaving the party about 2 o'clock a.m. Lavagni noted no Americans present at this party. He was familiar with the appearance of Lee Harvey Oswald because of the publicity following the assassination of President Kennedy, but otherwise had no knowledge of him and had never seen him except for news photographs following the assassination. Lavagni was the only person interviewed by the FBI who attended parties at the Duran house in September-October timeframe. There was no indication on the document that this information was given to the Central Intelligence Agency's Mexico City station. Charles Thomas' first meeting with Elena Garrow, where Lee Harvey Oswald is discussed on 12/10/65. Charles Thomas, a political officer at the American Embassy, wrote a memorandum about a conversation with Elena Garrow de Paz, CIA number 586587, and all that other blah, blah, blah. The meeting with Elena had been about other matters, but she mentioned knowing Oswald. Thomas noted that she was reluctant to talk about it, but did. Elena's story reported here is the same, but with more details, as that is given in the L.I. Cookie memo dated 10/5/64. She said that General Jose Jesus Clark Flores, a friend of Ruben Duran's and Sylvia Duran, Eswebibo, I don't know what the fuck name is that, Ascu, Cuban consul in Mexico City, Emilio Carbalido, a pro-communist writer friend of the Durans, and a Latin American Negro man with red hair, unidentified, were at the party. A marginal comment by this entry in WX-7241 says, "How did Elena know about the red-haired Negro?" Elena also told Thomas that she had later learned that Sylvia Duran had been in Oswald's mistress. Sylvia had been Oswald's mistress while he was there. A note by this entry in WX 7241 says, "How did Elena Garrow know about Sylvia Duran being the mistress of Oswald?" This is 1965. The Mexico City station did not hear about the Oswald Duran affair until July of 67, when a CIA asset, LI Ring 3, reported it. After reviewing LI Ring 3's file at the CIA, the House Select Committee on Assassinations had been unable to determine who LI Ring 3 was associated with and had knowledge about Sylvia Duran or Lee Harvey Oswald. Elena told Thomas that she and her daughter had gone to the Cuban embassy on November 23, 1963, and shouted "assassins" and other insults at embassy employees. That same day, a friend, Manuel Calvillo, an official in the Gobernación, took her and her daughter to a small hotel in the center of Mexico City. They were kept there for 8 days under the pretext that they were in danger. Elena claimed to have told Calvillo that she wanted to tell her story to the American embassy. Calvillo dissuaded her by telling her that the American embassy was full of communist spies. Elena said that some of the other people who had been at the party were taken to Veracruz, where they were protected by Governor Lopez Arias. And then it says, "I bid the House Select Committee was unable to determine the veracity of Ms. Paz's allegation. She said that Ruben Duran, reportedly protected by General Clark Flores, was very prosperous and was driving a big car. Elena also claimed that Ruben Duran told her months after the assassination that he was not really a communist and that killing Kennedy had been a mistake. I bid the House Select Committee on Assassination has not been able to determine whether Ruben actually spoke to Elena about the assassination. Ruben Duran claims he had no reason to." Charles Thomas circulated a copy of the Charles Thomas Memorandum in the American Embassy, including the Central Intelligence Agency's Mexico City station, to aid them in their investigation of the John F. Kennedy assassination. The House Select Committee has determined that the Central Intelligence Agency received a copy of the Thomas Memorandum prior to December 25, 1965. The COS wrote a note on the memo. "What an imagination she has. Should we send to headquarters?" The officer replies. "Suggests sending. There have been stories around town about all this, and Thomas is not only person she has talked to. If memory serves, didn't L.I. Cookie refer to Oswald and the local leftists and Cubans in one of her squibs?" CIA number 588, note from SW to COS. The Mexico City station called the information in Thomas 121065 memorandum of conversations to CIA headquarters. Cable from Mexico City to the director, Mexico 5621, date out off my copy, CIA number 584 to 585. The cable reported that Elena's story would be checked with LI and Chant 1 against the production from the Cuban surveillance operation and other sources. When Scott wrote next to the routing indications on the cable, quote, "Please ask Charles Thomas if he'll follow up. Get questions from Ann G." That's Ann Goodpasture. "Please let's discuss. Thanks." After the December 10 memorandum of conversations, when Scott and Nathan Ferris, legal attaché, called Charles Thomas for a meeting, they asked him to get more detailed replay of Ms. Garrow's story. At this meeting, when Scott made it clear that the FBI had full responsibility for any further investigation in the Oswald case. State Department letter from Charles Thomas, 2 months after the assassination, two communists personally warned her never to reveal that she had been to a party with Oswald. Deba consequently would not accompany Elena to the American Embassy to tell her story on November 24th, 1964. Elena said that a few days after the assassination, Emilio Carbalito took the Durans to Jalpa, Veracruz, and, quote, "keep them out of the way until the initial shock of the assassination wore off." The House Select Committee has been unable to confirm Ms. Garrow's allegation. Elena also alleged that shortly after the assassination, an American named June Cobb spent several days in her house. She said that Ms. Cobb had been sent to Elena by a mutual friend, Eunice Odio. Elena claims that while Ms. Cobb was at her house, she expressed an interest in the Kennedy assassination. Deba, visiting Elena one night, got drunk and told Ms. Cobb the entire story. Ms. Cobb wanted them to go to the American authorities. Claiming to be a CIA agent, Cobb suggested that Elena and Deba go to Texas to tell their story. When her suggestion was rejected, Cobb said that she would arrange a meeting with the CIA station chief. The meeting did not occur because Ms. Cobb was asked to leave the Garrow house, evidently because she kicked Elena's cat. The House Select Committee on Assassinations has determined that June Cobb Sharp was a CIA asset in 1964. Let's pull everything on June Cobb Sharp. Elena claimed that Ruben Duran visited her circa the end of January 1964. He was worried that Oswald's visit to his home might be discovered and that he might lose his Mexican citizenship. Ruben told Elena that it had been Sylvia who had gotten him involved with Oswald. Ruben added that he was not really a communist and had opposed the assassination. Ruben Duran denied the story. HSCA interview of Ruben Duran. The source material is redacted. Elena said that she had told her story to Noe Palmares, N-O-E, last name Palomars, of the Gobernacion about 6 months after the assassination. He advised against going to the American embassy and told her that if she did anything at all, she should merely write an anonymous letter. The committee spoke to Mrs. Palomares, and who denied Ms. Garrow's claim. That's from the HSCA interview of Noe Palomares. Source material again redacted. Elena stated that it was common knowledge that Sylvia had been Oswald's mistress. When asked who could verify the allegation, she could only remember one person who had told her this. Elena claimed this person was Victor Rico Gallon, a pro-Castro journalist. Victor Rico Gallon is dead. The committee could not verify Ms. Garrow's allegation. Sylvia Duran denied the allegation. Nonetheless, LI Ring 3, a CIA asset, reported the same story in 1967. During these conversations, Elena also said that she understood that Oswald had been in Mexico more than once. Oh, shit! Who has been to Mexico more than once? Not Oswald. It was Carrie Thornley. It was Carrie Thornley. God, I love being right. All right, I lost my place, so I'll start here again. During these conversations, Elena also said that she understood that Oswald had been in Mexico more than once. The HSCA has been unable to determine the exact date. Subsequent to December 25th, 1965, Thomas wrote in the December 25th, 1965 memo that Elena had found her calendar and had reconstructed the date of the party as late September and not early September. Doesn't matter if it was early or late. It was Carrie Thornley both times by his own fucking admission. When Thomas went to Ferris's office and informed him, Ferris replied that Elena had given the late September date when she had originally reported her story at the American embassy. However, Mr. Ferris explained to Thomas that someone who had been at the party had stated that there were no Americans there. Mr. Ferris did not tell Mr. Thomas that Ario Alejandro Lavignini, Stenius Ferris, had provided this information in 1964. Mr. Ferris suggested that it was not necessary for Thomas to pursue the matter, since he considered the Oswald case closed and had heard all the rumors before. The State Department forwarded the same day a copy of the Charles Thomas Memorandum to the CIA Mexico City station to aid in their investigation of the JFK assassination. On the first page of the memorandum of conversation, when Scott wrote, "Shouldn't we send to headquarters?" someone responded, "Of course." December 27, 1965, a legal attaché memo to the United States Ambassador Elena Garrow. On December 27, 65, the legal attaché had written a memo to the ambassador reporting that Elena and her daughter were interviewed on 17 and 24 November 1964. Memo to the ambassador from the legal attaché. 12/27/65, CIA number 578, blah, blah, blah. The memo said that Elena and her daughter furnished information similar to that in Thomas' 12/10/65 memo. The memo further stated, quote, "Inquiries conducted at that time, November 64, however, failed to substantiate the allegations made by Mrs. Garrow de Paz and her daughter. In view of the fact that Mrs. Garrow de Paz's allegations have been previously checked out without substantiation, no further action is being taken concerning her recent repetition of those allegations." The legal attaché forwarded a copy of the memorandum to the CIA's Mexico City station. House Select Committee had determined that the copy was forwarded prior to 12/29/78. When Scott superimposed redacted a note to Ann Goodpasture on this memo, which read, "Can we send in a report to headquarters dismissing our cable?" Goodpasture responded, "Done." Memo to ambassador from the legal attaché 122765, and a whole bunch of other more reference data. The cable when Scott wanted dismissed was Mexi 5621. A cable written by Ann Goodpaster on December 29, 1965, reporting on the Legat interview with Elena and Legat office failure to substantiate Elena's story was sent to headquarters. Memo from Mexico City to the director 122965. The cable promised to keep headquarters advised if any further information were to develop. L.I. Cookie's 10564 memo is attached to this cable. WX7241 explained this in marginal comment. Quote, this document by L.I. Cookie was not in Oswald's file, but was copied from a project file and attached to Mexi 5741, 29 December of 1965. A note superimposed to this cable by Alan White stated, quote, I don't know what FBI did in November 64, but the Garros have been talking about this for a long time, and she is said to be extremely bright. Ann Goodpaster wrote that the FBI had found Elena's allegations unsubstantiated, but that we will try to confirm or refute Ms. Garro de Paz's information and follow up. When Scott wrote, she is also nuts. CIA investigation of Elena's allegation that she created a disturbance at the Cuban embassy on November 23rd, 1963. This is a new heading. When I read the notes as to this memo, it appeared as though this was a memo written by Ann Goodpaster, but it does not appear to be the case. It appears to be numerous memos involving Ann Goodpaster written by the HSCA. So, on February 3rd, 1966, Ann Goodpaster forwarded Thomas's December 25th, 1965 memo to the Cuban section with an attached note asking them to check whether Elena was seen creating such a disturbance as they claimed in front of the Cuban embassy. Note from Ann Goodpaster to the Cubans, 2366, CIA number 579. I want to get this document, WX7241. It's the CIA document. I don't know how the fuck we're going to find it, but WX7241. One Cuban section officer responded, no bells ring with me. Another one wrote, me neither. The third officer wrote, no pictures either. There is no indication that the penetration agents in the Cuban embassy were queried about Elena's allegation. I bid that there are no pictures is reasonable since Elena claimed that the event happened on a Saturday at 3 p.m. when the Cuban embassy was not normally photographically surveilled, and 2, the disturbance occurred inside the Cuban compound. HSCA examination of the CIA Cuban embassy photographic surveillance showed no surveillance on 11/23/63. New heading, Legal Attaché 22366 memo to the U.S. ambassador regarding Elena Garro's allegations. On 2/23/66, the legal attaché wrote a memo to the ambassador reporting that extensive investigation failed to disclose that Oswald had traveled to Mexico prior to September 26, 1963, and that no information had developed that would show that he had not been in New Orleans in the early part of that month. Memo from Legat to ambassador, 2/23/66. The memo reiterated that no further action was being taken by the FBI because Elena's allegation had not been substantiated. The legal attaché forwarded a copy to the Central Intelligence Agency's Mexico City station. The House Select Committee on Assassinations has been unable to determine when the copy was forwarded to the CIA. A marginal comment was made by Ann Goodpaster next to this entry in WX7241 says, quote, how can it be ascertained that Oswald did not travel to Mexico prior to early September 1963? There must be some basis for Elena's reporting. Charles Thomas, 7/13/66 memorandum of conversation re Elena Garro. On 7/13/66. Okay, so let me just point out something real quick. I think that we here have basically, in already having identified Kerry Thornley as having been the person who went to Mexico City and was posing as Oswald at the end of September, right? Once you connect the dots that it was Kerry Thornley in Mexico City. See, we're talking about these dates. Was Oswald ever there prior to the end of September? And they're like, oh, we don't know. No, we have no evidence. Well, of course not, because it was motherfucking Kerry Thornley. He went there in May on his way to Whittier, California, and he went back there on his way back to New Orleans when, at the end of August, early September, because he arrived back in New Orleans on September 4th, right? So it's clearly Kerry Thornley. This is just more substantiation that it was Kerry Thornley, right? I'm getting irritated because this is fucking obvious shit here that people have written books about and they couldn't figure out it was fucking Kerry Thornley. God, I fucking hate these Kennedy fucking researchers who haven't solved shit. They're the dumbest people ever. This is so easy to put two and two together on. It's unfucking believable. All right. On 7/13/66, Charles Thomas wrote a memorandum of conversation reporting that Elena had told him that she had received an invitation to visit Cuba from Ambassador Joaquin Hernandez Armas. Memorandum of conversation by Charles Thomas, 7/13/66. Elena gave Thomas two letters to support her claim. She said the letters had been delivered to her home by a driver from the Cuban embassy. The envelope gave her address as Vermont 38. Because of her stay at the Hotel Vermont, she saw the letters as a threat and was frightened. The HSCA's determined that the Cuban government invited Elena Guerrero to visit Cuba due to her literary talents. Now another heading, legal attaché memo to Winston Scott, re Elena's allegation that she had stayed at the Hotel Vermont from the day after the assassination until November 30th of 1963. On 10/13/66, the legal attaché wrote a memo to the CIA/COS reporting that a reliable confidential informant had reported that the records of the Hotel Vermont disclosed that Elena Paz, housewife from San Luis Potosi, had registered at the Hotel Vermont on November 23rd, 1963. She left on November 30th, 1963. That's from the memo from Legat to Winston Scott, 10/13/66. The House Select Committee of Assassinations has been unable to determine why the CIA and the Federal Bureau of Investigation waited until 66 to investigate this aspect of Elena's story. The memo said that the above individual may or may not be identical with Elena Guerrero de Paz. Charles Thomas, 12/25/65 memo states she, Elena, and her daughter did not personally register at the hotel. She thinks Calvillo registered them as relatives or friends of his from San Luis Potosi. Memo of conversation by Charles Thomas, 12/25/65. The entry for 10/13/66 Legat memo in W6-7241 bore the notation, "This is what Elena claimed and no one would believe her." New heading, Charles Thomas, September 30th, 69, letter to State Department and legal attaché's response. No further report on Elena's story was generated until 1969 when Charles Thomas was selected out. Selected out is a phrase used when an officer is retired after having been in one grade for the maximum period of time and not considered qualified for promotion to a higher grade. Then he wrote a memorandum to the Secretary of State, which included a cover letter stating, "Since I was the embassy officer in Mexico who acquired this intelligence information, I feel a responsibility for seeing it through to its final evaluation." State Department letter from Charles Thomas to William Rogers, Secretary of State, July 25th, 69. Charles Thomas' memorandum stated that he got no reaction from Nathan Ferris and Winston Scott regarding his memorandum of December 25th, 65. State Department letter from Charles Thomas to William Rogers, Secretary of State, July 25th, 69. In addition, Thomas wrote that the only person to speak to him about the December 25th, 65 memorandum, Charles Baumstra, Deputy Chief of Mission, State Department, Chief of Affairs at the time of President Kennedy's assassination and subsequent Oswald investigation, told him that Oswald had not been in Mexico on the date given for the party. State Department letter from Charles Thomas to William Rogers. Thomas noted that even when he reiterated that Elena had not changed her story, but rather that she had now given a more accurate account, Boonstra stated that the date was wrong and dismissed the entire affair. One of the Mexico City Legat officers, Nathan Ferris, in reply to Thomas' letter and memorandum, asserted that Thomas' office had been advised by memoranda dated December 27, 65 and February 23, 1966, that since Elena Guerrero's allegations had previously been investigated without substantiation, no further action was being taken concerning her recent repetition of those allegations. FBI report 93069, page 3-4, JFK document redacted. In their report, the Legat's office concluded that either the counselor or the political affairs did not route the memoranda to Charles Thomas, or that Thomas did not recall receiving them. Thomas wrote that when he went to Nathan Ferris's office to inform him that Elena had found her calendar and had reconstructed the date of the party as late September, Ferris replied that Elena had given the late September date when she had originally reported her story at the American Embassy. State Department letters from Charles Thomas to William Rogers, Secretary of State, July 25th, 69. Thomas noted that Ferris explained that someone who had been at the party had stated that there had not been any Americans. He wrote that he had assumed that Elena could have clearly been mistaken about the identity of the Americans she saw there, but never doubted that she had seen some Americans. Thomas alleged that Ferris suggested that it was not necessary for Thomas to pursue the matter, since he considered the Oswald case closed and had heard all the rumors before. The Legat office replied that Mr. Ferris had not told Thomas that someone who was at the party had stated that there had not been any Americans present. The report asserted that Thomas had been told it would not be necessary for him to pursue the matter any further since Elena's story had been investigated previously without being substantiated. In addition, the memo stated that Thomas had been told that Elena's story was considered a closed issue, not that the Oswald case was closed. House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation of Elena Garrow's allegations, new heading. The House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated Elena Garrow's story both through file reviews and personal interviews. The committee requested and reviewed the CIA's, FBI's, and State Department's files when available on Elena Garrow de Paz, Elenita Garrow de Paz, Manuel Calvillo, No W. Palomares, June Cobb Sharp, Victor Rico Galan, Eunice Odio, Sylvia Duran, Lydia Duran, Ruben Duran, Betty Cerratos, Horatio Duran, Eusebio Azcu, and Emilio Carbalido. Only Elena Garrow de Paz file contained information on her allegations. Though all the names listed above played a role in Elena Garrow de Paz's story, not one of their files included a reference to Elena Garrow de Paz. Furthermore, the House Select Committee on Assassinations requested and reviewed the Central Intelligence Agency's L.I. Cookie 1, L.I. Chant 1, L.I. Ring 3, L.I. Huff 1, and T.I. And Tichborne files. Once again, not one of the files included a mention of Elena Garrow's allegations. The House Select Committee on Assassinations learned that L.I. Cookie 1 was June Cobb Sharp, who first reported Elena's allegation. The committee also learned that L.I. Chant 1, redacted, who had hidden Elena Garrow and her daughter in a hotel the day following the assassination, Supra 13. He also told Elena that Sylvia Duran had been arrested before this fact had become public knowledge. Since a file review was inclusive, the committee decided to arrange interviews in Mexico with Sylvia Duran, Elena Garrow, Elenita Garrow, Horatio Duran, Ruben Duran, Lynn Duran, Emilio Carbadillo, and Betty Cerratos. The Mexican government informed the House Select Committee on Assassinations that Elena and Elenita Garrow disappeared in 1968 during the student uprisings and have never returned to Mexico. The official stated that Elena and her daughter might be in Spain. See Mexico procedural write-ups. The Mexican government reported that Emilio Carbalido could not be found. The others were interviewed between June 1st and June 6, 1978. Betty Cerratos, Lydia Duran, Ruben Duran, and Horatio Duran all stated that Elena was not the dancing type and therefore did not attend any of the twist parties at the Duran homes. Sylvia Duran was asked if Elena or Elenita Garrow ever attended twist parties at the Duran homes. She recalled Elena attending one twist party at Ruben's home in 1963 when the Garrows returned to Mexico from France. All the Durans denied that Lee Harvey Oswald had attended any party at one of their homes. The committee next asked the Central Intelligence Agency to arrange staff interviews with L.I. Chant 1, Manuel Calvillo, L.I. Cookie 1, June Cobb, along with a list of other assets who may have had information related to Lee Harvey Oswald's trip to Mexico City. The Central Intelligence Agency declined to aid the committee in this aspect of the investigation. The committee returned to Mexico City and attempted to locate June Cobb Sharp and Manuel Calvillo. See the procedural write-up, Trip to Mexico City. The results of the committee's work were as follows. The Mexican government told the committee that June Cobb Sharp received a tourist permit number 72781 on June 27, 1947, when she entered Mexico through Nuevo Laredo. She asked but was denied permission to represent the magazine Modern Mexico on June 21, 1948. She received a courtesy permit number 25556. Furthermore, the Mexican government explained that she disappeared in 1954 and never returned to Mexico. The committee believes that there is possibility that this information is incorrect. According to Ms. Cobb's CIA file, she worked for the agency as an asset in Mexico from 61 to 66. CIA report 65, June Cobb. Elena also stated that Ms. Cobb resided at her home in 1964. The Mexican government told the committee that Manuel Calvillo did not live at Kuo Tumek 877-5, as the committee had stated. Their agent in charge had spoken to the superintendent at the apartments for the past 25 years, who said that no Manuel Calvillo had ever resided there. When committee staffers gave the Mexican government Calvillo's pen name, the Mexicans gave the same answer. The committee is quite certain that Mr. Calvillo lives at this address, since it is acquired from the address from a recent CIA document. CIA report 1976 on the file on Manuel Calvillo, 201 file. The committee believes there is a possibility that the Mexican government receives orders from the CIA to refrain from aiding the committee with the aspect of its work. You don't say. You don't fucking say. The committee made every attempt possible to locate Elena on July 7th of 78. The committee staffer telephoned her publisher Moritz in Mexico City and asked about her whereabouts. The publisher stated that Ms. Guerra was living in a hotel, SACE, in Madrid, Spain. The committee staffer telephoned the hotel in Spain and spoke to the manager, who told him that Ms. Guerra had moved out. On July 14th, 78, a committee staffer called her publisher again and was told to contact the Mexican embassy in Madrid, Spain. The publisher stated that all Elena's checks were sent there because she did not even trust her publisher with the address. The committee staffer called the Mexican embassy in Madrid, Spain, and spoke to Adolfo Padilla, an employee who stated that when Elena visited the embassy a couple weeks before to pick up the check, she looked financially poor. He stated that when he asked Elena about her new address, she had declined to give one, stating that she would return every few weeks to pick up checks and mail. The staffer left the committee's number and a message asking Elena to telephone the committee collect. On September 5th, 1978, Elena Guerra called the committee staffer. When the staffer explained that the committee wished to talk to her in person and would pay both her daughter and travel expenses from Spain, Ms. Guerra asked why she should believe the staffer who he claimed. The staffer asked Ms. Guerra to call back collect in the next few days, when he could explain to her when and where she could receive the committee letter delineating why the committee wished to interview her. The committee wrote the letter and made arrangements with the State Department for a letter to be hand-delivered to Elena at the American Embassy in Spain. She attached the letter, also HSCA staff contact report 9578, JFK document redacted. On September 7th, 78, Elena Guerra called the committee staffer and asked when the letter would arrive. The committee staffer explained the letter would be gotten on Monday, September 11th, 1978, from George Fellon, the counselor for the consular affairs at the American Embassy. Ms. Guerra stated that she would get the letter on September 11th, 78, and follow our suggestions. Ms. Guerra never went to the embassy in Spain to get the committee's letter. The committee, hoping she would receive the letter before her flight date, proceeded to purchase tickets for both Elena and her daughter. Elena never got the tickets at the airport. The committee never regained contact with her. The committee also investigated whether Thomas's selection out was related to the Oswald case. After interviewing his widow, Ms. Cynthia Thomas, the committee had concluded that his dismissal was unrelated. HSCA staff interview of Cynthia Thomas. All right, and that brings us to the end of the HSCA staff reports on Elena de Paz and Sylvia Duran, and a little background on what was going on, what they were investigating in Mexico City. And so, obviously, it was Kerry Thornley, not Oswald. They were investigating whether Oswald had been there prior to the end of September. And obviously, Kerry Thornley had twice in May and early September. And you have Miss Elena Guerra de Paz saying that Sylvia Duran, who was at the embassy with Oswald when he made his phone calls and stuff, was allegedly having an affair with Oswald the previous times that he had come to town. And I don't see a reason to doubt that. I mean, Kerry Thornley definitely got around. So I don't see why he wouldn't be hooking up down in Mexico City. Maybe that's why he went through Mexico City, so he could get himself a piece, right? So good stuff. We're going to be back tomorrow, and we will begin the interview of Ann Goodpasture, reference all of this stuff. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll be back tomorrow.